It's funny. I was reading the other day about how they can 3D print food now, and
Yeah.
it got me thinking, like, what if we could print clothes too?
Yeah, like a whole couture gown just printed out.
Exactly. It'd be kind of amazing, but also maybe a little, I don't know, sad.
I'm like, where's the craft, the human touch?
Right, exactly. But speaking of craft and artistry, we're not talking about the future of fashion today. We're going back in time to a very specific moment, actually.
To a collection, really, that I think in a lot of ways wrestled with some of these same ideas about how we perceive and create, art and fashion.
You're talking about Alexander McQueen, right?
Yeah, Alexander McQueen, his Autumn-Winter 2001 collection. What a merry-go-round.
A title that I'm sure we'll get into is pretty loaded with meaning.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So we've got a lot to unpack here, I think. We've got descriptions of the runway show itself, which, from what I've read, was quite the spectacle.
Oh, very much so, yeah.
And we got lots of material about the inspirations behind the collection, the historical and cultural references McQueen was playing with.
A lot of really fascinating stuff there, yeah.
And, of course, we've got to look at the critical reception, how the fashion world reacted at the time, and then, of course, what scholars have had to say about it since.
Because there are layers upon layers here.
Oh, definitely. So, what's our mission for this deep dive then?
I think what we really want to do is try to get under the skin of this collection, right? Not just describe what it looked like, but really understand what McQueen was trying to say?
Yeah, about the fashion industry, about maybe his own experiences, and of course, how it fits into his larger body of work.
Exactly.
Okay, so where do we even begin with something like this?
Well, I think you have to start with those clowns, right?
The clowns.
Yeah, the clowns. It's like, what? Clowns at a fashion show? What's that all about?
Right, it's not exactly the first thing that springs to mind when you think of high fashion.
No, definitely not. But McQueen was really interested in exploring these ideas of childhood, right? That time when we're supposed to be innocent and carefree, but also, when we're most vulnerable.
And he saw a connection between that and the fashion industry.
Exactly. Like it's this world that can be so seductive and glamorous, but also, really cutthroat and kind of brutal.
So the clowns, the carnival imagery, that's all kind of a metaphor for that.
I think so, yeah.
And it wasn't just clowns and carnivals, though, was it? I mean, he
Yeah.
was pulling inspiration from all over the place.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
He's got military influences in there, this sort of dark, gothic vibe inspired by old silent films. There's even a touch of the French Revolution in there, believe it or not.
It's like he threw everything into a blender,
Man.
and somehow it all came out coherent.
Yeah, and that's the thing about McQueen, right? He could take all these disparate elements and somehow weave them into this really cohesive and powerful vision.
And what about the colors? I mean, everything's so dark and moody.
Yeah, very somber, lots of blacks, deep purples, these kind of muted greens. It all adds to this feeling of like unease and, well, darkness, I guess.
Which kind of makes sense given the whole clown theme.
Right, because clowns can be scary. I mean, McQueen himself said that he found them really scary. And I think that really gets to the heart of what he was trying to say with this collection.
It wasn't just an aesthetic choice, it was about something deeper.
Exactly. He was exploring those darker aspects of childhood, the vulnerabilities, the anxieties that can linger even as we grow up. And for him, that really resonated with the fashion world.
And let's not forget that this was also the collection
Yeah.
where he introduced that skull motif that's become so iconic.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's almost hard to imagine now, but that was the first time we saw that skull. Did you know it actually wasn't planned? He just had it embroidered on some knitwear last minute.
Really?
Yeah, and it just kind of took off from there, became this whole symbol of, well, I don't know, rebellion maybe. Mortality. I guess it depends on how you interpret it.
Okay, so we've got these clowns, this dark color palette, the skull motif making its first appearance.
Yeah.
But there's also this whole other layer to the collection, right? The runway show itself.
Oh, yeah. The runway show was a whole other level of drama.
So tell me about it. Like, where was it? What did it look like?
Well, it was held in this big empty warehouse, the Gatliff Road warehouse in London. Actually, it was his last show in London before he moved to Paris.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the centerpiece of the whole thing was this massive antique carousel.
Like a real carousel.
Yeah, a real carousel. But it wasn't all bright lights and cheerful music, It was all draped in black and purple latex.
Latex.
Latex. And apparently it stank to high heaven. I mean, latex has a pretty strong smell anyway, but imagine a whole carousel covered in it.
Oh, God, I can't even.
Yeah, it was apparently quite something. And then, to add to the whole creepy vibe, they had the models come out at the end dressed as quote-unquote evil clowns.
Evil clowns.
Yeah, with like crazy hair and dark makeup and these really dramatic outfits.
And they were standing in front of this carousel.
No, this is the really crazy part. At the back of the stage, behind the carousel, there were all these piles of like dusty toys and old teddy bears and stuff, like a forgotten childhood. You know, it was this really stark contrast.
Wow. I can see why people were talking about this show for months afterwards.
Oh, yeah, it was definitely designed to make an impact. And McQueen had this incredible team working with him, you know.
Yeah, like who?
Well, Katie England did the styling, and the set design was by Joseph Bennett. He'd worked with McQueen on a few shows before this one.
So he knew how to create a mood.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And the makeup was by Val Garland. She's like a legend in the fashion world. And Philip Treacy did the hats. I mean, some of those hats were insane.
So it sounds like this was a pretty collaborative effort.
Very much so, yeah.
What about the music? What were they playing?
Well, it started with this really creepy recording of The Child Catcher from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
Oh, wow. Setting the tone right from the start.
Yeah. And then they had this mix of like heavy metal and actually some more stuff from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Yeah, like the theme tune. And then they threw in some bits from the Rosemary's Baby soundtrack. I mean, talk about eclectic.
It's like he was trying to unsettle the audience as much as possible.
I think that's a fair assessment, yeah.
Okay, so tell me about some of the actual clothes.
Yeah.
What were some of the standout looks?
Well, there was this one black dress with a gold fox skeleton draped over the shoulders.
A skeleton.
Yes, a skeleton, like made out of gold. It was very McQueen, you know, kind of beautiful and macabre at the same time.
Oh, for sure. And he always loved using animal imagery in his work.
Exactly. Oh, and there was this incredible coat with a really high collar, like really high. And it had this intricate embroidery on it, inspired by Chinese designs.
So he was pulling from all these different cultures.
Oh, yeah, always. And then there was this amazing necklace, just a showstopper, designed by Sean Lean.
Lean.
Yeah, he did all the jewelry for McQueen. This necklace was made of Tahitian pearls and pheasant claws.
Pheasant claw.
Pheasant claws. Like, I'm not kidding. It was very 1920s in a way, but with this really dark, almost gothic twist.
Golden McQueen.
Totally. And then there was this, oh God, this helmet designed by Philip Treacy with these huge black feathers and a metal skull on top. It was worn with this sheer black slip dress with purple embroidery. The whole look was described as like half siren, half Valkyrie.
Sounds intense.
Oh, it was. And of course, you can't forget that simple black knit dress with the white skull on the front. That was the debut of the skull, you know?
Yeah, right.
And then in the finale, when the models came out as these evil clowns, one of them had a gold skeleton attached to her ankle. It was from one of his earlier collections.
Also, he was kind of referencing his own work, too.
Exactly, like a little wink to the audience. And then another model had on this incredible silver dress cut on the bias that looked a lot like the painting Liberty Leading the People.
Wow, I love that he brought in these art historical references.
Yeah, he was so well read, you know, like he drew inspiration from everywhere.
It's amazing how he could bring it all together so seamlessly.
It really is. Oh, and we can't forget about poor Erin O'Connor.
What?
Well, she got tangled up in some balloons during the finale. Yeah, it was kind of a funny moment in an otherwise pretty intense show.
Okay, so what was the reaction like? What did the critics think of all this?
Well, they mostly loved it. I mean, a lot of them were just blown away by the theatricality of it all, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a proper spectacle.
Oh, totally. Some of them were calling it Broadway worthy, which I think is pretty accurate.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And a lot of the critics felt that it was like the most exciting show of the season, you know? Like McQueen was really pushing boundaries and setting himself apart from other designers.
That's kind of his thing, though, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. But what's interesting is that even though it was so theatrical, a lot of the critics also thought there was some real commercial potential there.
Really?
Yeah, they were particularly impressed with the dresses and the suits. They thought those would appeal to, like, you know, confident, assured women.
Right, women who weren't afraid to stand out.
Yeah. Exactly. And everyone was praising the way he played with contrasts, like masculine and feminine, romantic and severe.
Yeah, and that's something you see throughout his work.
Oh, absolutely. And then, of course, they loved the colors and the patterns, which, as we've discussed, were pretty unique.
But surely not everyone was completely on board. I mean, it all sounds pretty out there.
Well, there were some dissenting voices, yeah. Some critics thought that the theme, you know, the whole clown thing didn't really come through in the clothes themselves. And some people thought the military elements were a bit harsh, Maybe even a little too close to, like, Nazi imagery for comfort.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is a pretty serious accusation, obviously.
Yeah, definitely.
And then there was Susie Menkes. She was a really influential critic at the time, and she basically said that McQueen was maybe rehashing old ideas a bit. Like, he was too young to be doing that.
Oh, so like repeating himself?
Kind of, yeah. And then, of course, there were the usual complaints about the clothes not being wearable for real women, which, I mean, come on, it's McQueen. What did they expect?
Right. It's not exactly everyday wear.
Exactly. And it's funny, McQueen himself wasn't even that happy with the collection.
Really?
Yeah, he said it wasn't his strongest work and that he didn't really like looking back on it.
Huh. Well, that's kind of surprising. I wonder why he felt that way.
I don't know, it's hard to say. But I think it's interesting that the academics, the people who've studied this collection in depth, have come up with some pretty interesting interpretations.
Okay, like what?
Well, some people think that it was actually a critique of the fashion industry itself, particularly LVMH, which was the luxury conglomerate that owned Givenchy at the time.
Givenchy.
Yeah, McQueen was the creative director there for a while, and it wasn't exactly a happy relationship.
Ah, so he was using this collection to kind of take a jab at them.
Maybe. I mean, some people think that the use of the child catcher's voice was a reference to Bernard Arnault, who was the CEO of LVMH.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the French Revolution references, some people think those were about McQueen's desire to break free from LVMH, to be more independent.
Interesting.
And then there's also this whole theory about the collection being a response to John Galliano.
Galliano.
Yeah, he was another big designer at the time working for Dior. They were kind of seen as rivals.
Right, like two very different approaches to fashion.
Exactly. And some people think that McQueen was kind of playing with Galliano's signature styles in this collection, like the slip dresses, the military coats, even the hairstyles.
So like a little bit of a fashion rivalry going on.
Possibly, yeah. It's hard to say for sure, but it's definitely an interesting theory.
So putting aside the theories and the interpretations, like what's the lasting impact of this collection? What do you think its legacy is?
Well, I think on a purely visual level, it's the introduction of the skull. That's become such a huge part of the McQueen brand, and it all started here.
And beyond the skull.
I think this collection really solidified McQueen's reputation as someone who wasn't afraid to push boundaries, to explore difficult themes, to be provocative.
He wasn't just making clothes, he was making a statement.
Exactly. And I think that's why people are still talking about this collection, all these years later, is because it wasn't just a fashion show. It was an experience.
And a pretty unsettling one at that.
Oh, for sure. But also incredibly powerful and moving. And that, I think, is the mark of a true artist.
So what do you think McQueen would say if he could see the impact this collection has had, over 2 decades later?
I don't know, he was a pretty complex guy, but I think maybe he'd be a little bit surprised. And maybe even a little bit proud.
It's definitely a collection that's cemented its place in fashion history.
Oh, absolutely.
So to wrap things up, I guess the big question is, what do we learn from What a Merry-Go-Round? Like, why should people care about a collection that was shown over 20 years ago?
Well, I think for one thing, it reminds us that fashion can be more than just about pretty clothes.
It can be art, it can be a commentary on society, it can be a way of expressing really deep personal emotions.
Exactly. And I think this collection also shows us the power of taking risks, of not being afraid to be different, to be challenging.
Because sometimes the most beautiful things come from the darkest places.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
Well, I don't know about you, but this deep dive has definitely left me with a lot to think about.
Me too.
Thanks for joining me on this one.
Of course, always a pleasure.
And everyone listening, thank you for coming along for the ride. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.